Welcome to Storytime. I am your host, Auntie, and today we will be reading the Giant Treasury of Fairytales, Book 1. This book includes the tales of Rumpelstiltskin, the Princess on the Glass Mountain, and the Brave Little Tailor. Rumpelstiltskin. Once upon a time, a poor miller had a beautiful daughter, and because he wanted to appear important, he told everyone an awful fib that his daughter could spin straw into gold. The king loved gold more than anything, so he ordered the miller to bring his daughter to the palace. When she arrived, the king took her to a room with a spinning wheel and a pile of straw in it. The king said, "Work all night and spin this straw into gold. If you do not finish, you shall die." Locking the heavy door, he left the girl alone. Not having a clue how to spin straw into gold, the poor girl began to cry. Just then, a small voice said, "I can help you." Surprised, the girl turned around, and there stood a very small man. "I can spin the straw into gold," he said, "but what will you give me in return?" The girl said, "I will give you my necklace." The little man took it, then worked all night and spun every bit of straw into gold. The king was delighted and took the girl into another room with even more straw, telling her to spin it all into gold before sunrise or she would die. The poor girl began to cry again, but as before, a small voice said, "I can help you, but what will you give me in return?" The girl said, "I could give you my ring." The little man took it, then worked all night until the straw was spun into gold. The king, being a very greedy man, took the poor girl into yet another room with even more straw than before and told her that if she spun all the straw into gold by morning, he would make her his wife. She sat sobbing, and once again the little man appeared. "I will help," he promised, "but what will you give me this time?" The girl cried even harder, for she had nothing left to give. "Then promise when you are queen," the little man said, "to give me your firstborn child." The girl was desperate and quickly agreed. The little man worked all night until all the straw was gold. The king was delighted and married the girl at once. The queen forgot all about the little man until 1 year later she gave birth, and he appeared saying, "I have come to take what is mine." The queen was terribly upset and wept bitterly. The little man took pity on her. "I will give you 3 days to guess my name, and if you succeed, you may keep your son," he said. Next day, when the little man arrived, she said, "Is your name Thomas, Timothy, or Edward?" The little man shook his head. "Nicholas, Robert, or Stephen?" Again he shook his head. Finally he left, reminding the queen she now had only 2 days to guess his name. The next day, when the little man arrived, the queen tried more unusual names. "Is it Sheepshanks, Balthasar, Caspar?" Each time the little man shook his head, and finally he left, saying, "You have only until tomorrow. Then, if you do not know my name, I shall take your son." Frantically, the queen sent out her messengers to search for yet more names. In the early morning, one of them returned and told the queen, I came upon a clearing in the wood where a little man was dancing around the fire singing, "Tomorrow I brew, today I bake, and then the child I shall take. For little knows my royal dame that Rumpelstiltskin is my name." The queen was overjoyed and could not wait for the little man to appear. "Is your name Conrad?" she asked when he arrived. "Nope," he said, "not even close." "Is it Archibald or Egbert?" "No, no, no." The little man moved towards the cradle. "Perhaps it is Rumpelstiltskin," announced the queen triumphantly. The little man gave a scream of rage and stamped his feet so hard that he went right through the floor in a cloud of dust and was never heard of again. The end. The Princess on the Glass Mountain. Once there lived a man who had 3 sons. The eldest 2 were mean and nasty. The youngest brother, named Cinder, was kind and had a special way with animals, instantly controlling them with his touch. Their father owned a meadow with a hay barn in it, but every harvest time something strange occurred. All the long grass that was ready for cutting disappeared, as though it had been eaten. Finally, the man told his sons that one of them must sleep in the barn to find out what was happening. Harvest time arrived, and the eldest son slept in the barn and waited. Then one night, a terrible rumbling and a violent earthquake shook the barn. The lad was so frightened he ran home as fast as he could. Next day, all the grass was gone. Next harvest time, the second son said he would sleep in the barn. But the rumbling and earthquake came, and he too ran home. Next day, the grass was all gone again. The next year at harvest time, Cinder said he would stay in the barn. The others made fun of him, but he took no notice. Cinder waited, and as before, there came a terrible rumbling and an earthquake. "If it gets no worse than this, I can stand it," he thought. Suddenly, it was all quiet, except for the sound of chewing. Cinder peeked out of the barn door and saw a fine fat horse busy eating the grass. The horse wore a saddle and bridle, and on its back was a suit of bright copper armor. "So it is you who is eating our grass, is it?" As quick as a flash, he grabbed the horse's bridle. The horse stood obediently still while Cinder mounted and rode it to a secret place. Next morning, the grass was untouched. Harvest time arrived again, and Cinder was the only one brave enough to stay in the barn. This time, the earthquake was even more violent, but it was over soon, and the chewing began. Outside, Cinder found a splendid horse, bigger and fatter than the one before. On its back was a shining suit of silver armor. He captured it and rode it to the secret place where he kept the first horse, and so the grass was saved. The third year, Cinder again stayed in the barn. The earthquake was truly awesome. This time, a magnificent horse, bigger and fatter than the other 2, and with a glittering suit of gold upon its back, stood outside. Cinder quieted and rode off to the secret place where he kept the other 2. The grass was saved again. It happened that the king of the land had a beautiful daughter whom many wanted to marry. The king decided to have a contest and give his daughter and half his kingdom to the man who could ride to the top of a glass mountain which stood next to his palace. The princess was to sit at the top with 3 golden apples, which she would give to the victor. The day of the contest arrived. Princess and knights from all over the kingdom tried to ride up the glass mountain, but after a few feet, they all slipped back down. Then a fine horse and a rider dressed in bright copper armor appeared. He rode a third of the way up the mountain, then turned to ride back down. He impressed the princess, who quickly threw one of the golden apples to him. No one had reached the top, so the contest went on for a second day. But as before, everyone slipped back after a few feet. Then a rider wearing a shining silver suit and mounted on a splendid horse appeared. He rode 2/3 of the way up the mountain before turning around. The princess quickly threw the second golden apple to him as he rode away. On the third day of the contest, a rider appeared, mounted on a magnificent horse and dressed in glittering gold armor. He rode easily up the mountain, took the golden apple from the swooning princess, and rode away. The king interviewed every man in the land, trying to discover who had the golden apples. Finally, the king said, "Is there anyone I have not seen?" Cinder's brothers told the king about him, saying he was too shabby for the king to see. "Bring him to me," ordered the king. Cinder appeared before the king, bringing with him all 3 golden apples. He threw off his ragged clothes and stood magnificent in his golden armor. The king was delighted and gave Cinder his daughter in marriage and half his kingdom. Everyone, except his brothers, of course, was overjoyed, and the celebrations lasted for a very long time. The end. The Brave Little Tailor. Once upon a time there lived a tailor. One day he was working hard and looking forward to his lunch of bread and jam, when he saw that flies were crawling all over the jam. Annoyed, he hit the flies with a duster. He killed 7 in one blow. 7 in one blow, said the tailor. I am destined for great things. It is time to go seek my fortune. He made himself a belt upon which he stitched 7 in one blow, and then, putting some cheese in his pocket, he left home. On his way, he freed a bird caught in a bush and put it in his pocket. A while later, he came upon a giant. The giant saw the tailor's belt and took it to mean 7 men. He said to the tailor, "If you are so strong, could you do this?" He picked up a stone and squeezed it until water ran out. "Ha! Easy," scoffed the tailor, taking the cheese from his pocket and squeezing until the whey ran out. "Look," he said, "I can squeeze milk from a stone." "Beat this, then," retorted the giant, throwing a stone high into the sky. "Watch this!" The tailor took the bird from his pocket and threw it into the air. Pleased to be free, it flew high and was gone. "Humph," muttered the giant, "but can you carry this tree?" "Of course I can," replied the tailor. "I'll take the heavy end with all the branches." The giant picked up the tree and started walking. Tailor made himself comfortable among the branches and started whistling as though carrying the tree were nothing to him. The giant took the tailor to his cave. He and his giant friends fed him and then showed him where to sleep. But in the middle of the night, they crushed the bed to pieces and laughed, thinking they had killed the tailor. Little did they know, he had found the bed too large and crept into a corner. of the cave to sleep. He quickly ran away and didn't stop for many miles. Finally, he lay down in the shelter of a tree and slept. As he slept, many people from a nearby town gathered around him, fascinated by the words stitched on his belt. They took him to the king, who made him captain of the army. The king's soldiers did not like a stranger as their captain and soon asked the king to remove him. The king was in a dilemma. If he ignored the soldiers' request, they might desert him, but if he offended the tailor, he might take his revenge. The king had an idea. He called the tailor to him. Complete 3 tasks and you shall marry my daughter. First, rid the nearby wood of 2 evil giants that live there. The tailor set out and soon came upon the 2 giants asleep in the wood. He filled his pockets with stones, climbed a tree, and began to throw stones at the giants, who woke up, each assuming that the other was throwing stones at him. They started to fight. They fought long and hard until they were both dead. Triumphantly, the tailor showed the giants to the king, who gave him another task. Capture the unicorn living in the wood. The tailor set off and soon came across the unicorn. Upon seeing the tailor, it lowered its horn and charged. Quick as a flash, the tailor, who was standing in front of a tree, jumped aside. Unable to stop, the unicorn hit the tree with such a force its horn became stuck. The tailor put a rope around the unicorn, freed it, and then took his prize to show the king. The king gave the tailor a third and final task, to capture a vicious wild boar that roamed the wood. He set off and found the boar, who charged, following the fleeing tailor into a nearby building. The tailor leapt out of a window, but the boar was too big and heavy to follow. Rushing to the front of the building, the tailor slammed the door shut. The victorious tailor showed the king where the boar was, and the king had to keep his promise. The tailor was to marry the princess the next day. That night, however, a guard heard the bridegroom talking in his sleep and discovered he was only a simple tailor. He told the king, who vowed to get rid of him. But the tailor's servant, overhearing the conversation, went and warned his master. Outside the tailor's door, 100 men got ready to pounce. Just then, the tailor began to speak, as if in his sleep. Boy, take the mayor his coat, or I shall box your ears. Have I not killed 7 in one blow, overcome 2 giants, a unicorn, and a wild boar? What care I for those who wait outside my door tonight? At that, the men outside the door fled, terrified. The tailor married the princess and in time became king, and his royal motto was 7 in one blow. The end. Thank you for joining me in Storytime. If you enjoyed this book, please give me a thumbs up and feel free to give me a comment on what I should read next. This Storytime is dedicated to my nieces and nephews with a lot of love. I hope to see you in the next Storytime.